He woke to a morning that felt ordinary, though somehow heavier than usual. The light came softly through the windows, brushing the edges of the room in a pale, patient way, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He moved slowly, noticing the quiet sounds that others might never hear. The faint creak of a floorboard, the distant rustle of leaves outside, the subtle rhythm of his own breathing. It was in these small, almost invisible moments that he first felt the weight of being unseen. He went through the motions of the day. Words passed around him like wind through trees, quick and light, but none of them reached him. He smiled politely when they spoke to him, though inside, a gentle ache lingered. It was not a sharp pain, more like a soft echo that reminded him of something he had always known, that people often walk close to each other without ever noticing the quiet ones. They laughed and argued, made plans and offered opinions, but he remained a shadow in their midst, present but unclaimed. And yet, in that invisibility, there was a strange kind of clarity. Without their attention, he could see the world differently. He noticed the subtle shifts in the air when someone entered a room, the way a chair tilted slightly when someone paused, the fleeting expressions that passed across faces before they were hidden again. These were details that went unnoticed, lost in the noise of words and gestures, but they were there for him. He carried them quietly, as if holding small treasures no one else would ever understand. There was a moment, just after sunrise, when he paused by a window and watched a bird land on the branch of an old tree. The bird tilted its head, pecked gently at something unseen, and then lifted off again, wings catching the light. He wondered how often he moved through the world with that same quiet diligence, unnoticed and unremarked. Did it matter that they did not see him? Did it matter that they did not understand? For a long time, he thought it should. But now he began to sense that perhaps there was a different kind of strength in simply being. As he walked through the day, he carried the small, delicate awareness of his own presence. He felt the pulse of life around him, the soft undercurrent of voices, footsteps, and the low hum of existence, and he felt a certain gentle satisfaction in just noticing. The world was not cruel. It simply moved without pause, and he moved within it quietly and deliberately. And yet, beneath the calm surface, there was a faint stirring, a whisper of longing. He wanted nothing extravagant, nothing loud or declared, only the simple acknowledgement that he existed, even if it was only for himself. He offered small gestures, moments of kindness that went unnoticed. A soft word here, a careful hand there. Sometimes they smiled in passing. Sometimes they did not. And still, he kept giving, quietly, without expectation. It was not weakness that guided him, but something quieter, something deeper. There was a kind of courage in continuing to act when no one was watching. A courage that did not demand recognition, a courage that simply moved in harmony with the gentle rhythm of his own heart. And in these silent movements, he began to understand something he had never named. Life did not always require acknowledgement. It did not always demand applause or notice. There was a different kind of richness in the unnoticed moments, in the small acts that left no mark on the world, but left something in him. He felt a delicate unfolding inside, like petals opening in a slow, secret rhythm. Each quiet observation, each unnoticed gesture, each pause to simply breathe, they were all part of a quiet tapestry he wove around himself. As the day wore on, he noticed the little things more keenly, the way sunlight caught on the edges of a leaf, the subtle bend of a path through the grass, the way shadows shifted as clouds moved across the sky. These were the things that spoke to him when no one else would, and he listened. He listened with a patience that felt almost sacred, as though every unnoticed detail carried a hidden meaning, a gentle reminder that life could still be full, even in silence. By evening, he returned to a place of stillness, sitting alone in the fading light. He felt the quiet pulse of his own being, steady and calm, and he realized that he had survived the day without fanfare, without the need for recognition. And in that quiet endurance, he felt something tender and profound, a sense of self that did not rely on the eyes of others, a presence that was enough simply because it was. And for the first time that day, he allowed himself a faint, peaceful smile, knowing that the world had not noticed. And yet, he had witnessed it all fully and quietly in his own way. He wondered softly, almost to himself, if perhaps this was the beginning of something that could not be seen, but could be felt. A life shaped not by the approval of others, but by the gentle discipline of silence, by the tender strength of simply being, quietly, with his own heart. They did not understand. At first, it was subtle, a look here, a word there, a slight tilt of their heads, as if questioning why he moved or spoke the way he did. And then it grew, as small misunderstandings often do, filling the space around him like quiet clouds drifting across a pale sky. He could feel it, though they did not say it aloud. The invisible weight of judgment pressing softly, insistently, in ways that were hard to name. He wondered why they needed to understand at all. Could they not simply let him be? Their questions, their quiet disapproval, hovered around him, and he noticed how easily they could twist a gentle act into something else entirely. A soft word of encouragement was interpreted as weakness. A small kindness became a sign of need. He felt it all, each misunderstanding, a tiny ripple across the surface of his calm, yet he did not react. He simply breathed and listened and observed. The ache of being misread is not loud. It does not roar or demand attention. It is a quiet companion, settling in the corners of the chest, a reminder that the world does not always move in harmony with the heart. And yet, in this quiet ache, there was also a certain clarity. He began to see the way they moved, how they spoke with certainty, even when they did not fully know, how they assumed, how they named what they did not understand. It was both frustrating and revealing. He realized that their misunderstanding had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with the limits of their own vision. There were moments when he almost spoke, almost explained himself, almost pushed back against the quiet assumptions that pressed so close. But each time he felt the pause inside him, a gentle hand stopping the words before they could fall. Could it be that silence held more weight than explanation? Could it be that the act of withholding, a reaction, of not feeding the fire, of misunderstanding, was itself a form of quiet power? He wondered, softly, if perhaps the world could not always see the truth. And yet, that did not mean the truth was not there. As the day stretched on, the misunderstanding became a sort of companion. It followed him in subtle ways, curling around his thoughts, brushing against the edges of his mind. And still, he did not reach out to correct it. He did not argue. He did not clarify. He did not seek their approval or understanding. Instead, he turned inward, noticing the small rhythms of his own heart, the soft rise and fall of his breathing, the delicate sensation of being alive. It was there, in that quiet observation, that he found something that no misunderstanding could touch. They may have thought him timid, or weak, or lost in his own world. Perhaps they whispered judgments behind hands. Perhaps they drew conclusions that were not true. And yet, he remained. He remained in the stillness, in the calm, in the quiet unfolding of his own being. There was a strange, gentle satisfaction in this. To be misunderstood and yet undisturbed, was this not a rare sort of freedom? A freedom that could not be given or taken, but only quietly claimed within oneself. Sometimes he imagined speaking, laying out the truths they could not see, letting them understand who he was, piece by piece. But then he realized that such explanations were never really necessary. Understanding was not a requirement for existence, and recognition was not the measure of worth. The world could misread him, twist his intentions, overlook the small gestures of care he offered, yet none of this could diminish the quiet certainty he held inside. His life, his moments, his inner rhythm. These remained untouched. In the moments when their eyes lingered on him, or when their words brushed past him with subtle judgment, he practiced a gentle observation of his own. He noticed the flicker of emotion in their faces, the quick adjustments in posture, the small signs that revealed more than their words ever could. And in noticing, he did not feel anger or frustration, only a quiet curiosity. Why did they need to misinterpret? Why did they assume what they could not see? And then, almost without realizing it, he let the questions go, and simply returned to the soft pulse of his own inner life. By evening, he sat alone, the quiet of the day folding around him like a soft blanket. The misunderstandings of others did not sting now. They were distant, like faint echoes in a room he no longer needed to fill with explanation. He breathed slowly, gently, and felt the simple dignity of having remained still, of having chosen silence over reaction. The ache of being misread had not disappeared entirely, but it had softened, settling into a quiet companion rather than a sharp companion. And he began to understand, with a tender clarity, that the truest measure of strength was not in being understood, But in remaining undisturbed, he wondered, softly, if perhaps this was how one learned the quiet power of restraint, not through words or protests, but through the patient, gentle practice of sitting in one's own stillness, even when the world pressed against it. And as the light faded, he allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile, knowing that the world might never see the truth of him, and yet he had seen it fully himself. The day ended not with applause or recognition, but with a quiet, steady heartbeat, a life lived gently and entirely within his own understanding. In the quiet hours that followed, he began to notice something new, stirring inside him. It was not loud or insistent, but soft and deliberate, like the first hint of wind across still water. He realized that in the spaces between their misunderstanding, in the pauses where he could have reacted, he was discovering a form of strength he had never truly named before. Could it be that power lived not in words, but in the calm that remained when words were withheld? Could it be that dignity grew quietly in the places where reaction might have burned too brightly? He observed himself closely, as one might watch a river tracing its own course. Each time they misread him, each time their assumptions pressed against him, he felt a choice emerge. He could meet them with explanation, with defense, with a small argument that might make them see him more clearly. And yet, each time, he found himself pausing, and the pause became a teacher. It whispered to him that his energy was not theirs to take, that his truth did not need their permission to exist. The less he reacted, the more he began to sense the quiet power of being steady, of remaining unmoved while the world shifted around him. It was a strange, gentle discovery. For so long he had imagined that strength meant being noticed, that it meant proving oneself, that it meant speaking louder than the noise around him. And now he saw that there was another kind of strength, one that was quiet, patient, and entirely self-contained. It did not announce itself. It did not demand recognition. It simply existed, like the slow, steady light of a candle burning in a dark room. And in that existence, he felt a profound sense of freedom, a freedom that came from knowing that he could not be diminished by misunderstanding, nor lifted by praise. He began to move through the day with a different awareness. He still noticed them, still observed the subtle shifts in their faces, the hints of judgment or confusion, but now it no longer unsettled him. He felt their energy brush against him like a passing breeze, and he let it go, returning to the calm center he had begun to cultivate within. It was not always easy. At times, the urge to explain, to clarify, to insist on being seen arose like a small flame, flickering in the quiet room of his men. And each time, he simply watched it and allowed it to pass, learning the gentle art of restraint, of choosing silence over reaction, of understanding that sometimes the greatest response is no response at all. There were moments when he tested himself, moments when the weight of being unseen pressed heavily against his chest, and he felt a small ache of loneliness. And in those moments, he reminded himself softly that his worth was not measured by their understanding. It was measured by the integrity of his own heart. The quiet fidelity with which he held to his own principles, the gentle patience he practiced in the face of misunderstanding. Could it be that this was the truest kind of power, a strength so subtle that it could only be felt, not seen? In the spaces between his breaths, he began to notice the way life moved differently when he was not reacting. There was a clarity, a lightness, in letting things unfold without interference. He could watch the subtle beauty of the day, the soft sway of branches, the slow drift of clouds, the delicate play of shadows, without the distraction of needing to defend or assert himself. And in that observation, he felt a quiet joy, a small, steady satisfaction that did not depend on anyone else and could not be shaken by their misunderstanding. He realized that in holding back, in choosing silence over reaction, he was cultivating something enduring. It was not the kind of strength that drew attention, but the kind that built a deep, unwavering foundation within. Each moment of quiet resistance to the pull of explanation, each breath taken instead of a reply, was like laying a stone in a path he was quietly constructing for himself. A path that no one else could walk. A path shaped entirely by his own gentle discipline. A path that led him inward toward a place of steady calm. By the time evening came, he felt the soft glow of this inner power warming him from within. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present. He sat quietly, noticing the slow fade of light outside, the gentle hush that settled over the world, and he felt the steady pulse of his own being. The misunderstandings no longer seemed heavy, nor did he feel the need to chase clarity from others. He understood now that strength was not about proving anything, but about quietly holding to oneself, about allowing silence to shape him as much as action ever could. And in that stillness, he began to see the profound simplicity of it all. The power he had been seeking in words, in recognition, in being understood. It was here all along, quietly waiting, quietly growing, quietly his, a soft, unshakable power, born from patience, born from restraint, born from the gentle courage of simply being himself, without reaction, without explanation, without demand. And for the first time that day, he felt a sense of deep, quiet calm, the kind that comes from knowing that he needed nothing from the world but the quiet strength he carried within his own heart. Time passed, and with it, the small, quiet changes within him began to take shape. He noticed them not as sudden revelations, but as gentle shifts, like the slow turning of a river that carves its way through stone over many years. The act of holding his own calm, of allowing the world to misunderstand him without protest, had left its mark. He moved differently now, though no one around him seemed to notice. There was a subtle steadiness in the way he breathed, in the soft alignment of his thoughts, in the quiet weight he carried in his chest. It was an inner shift invisible to the eyes of others, yet undeniable to himself. He thought often of the small kindness that had begun it all, the one act so fleeting that no one had paid attention. Yet it had left a trace, a faint echo that lingered in the corners of his being. That simple gesture had not changed the world, but it had changed him. It had taught him that life need not always be loud to be meaningful, that acts of care, no matter how unnoticed, could shape the heart in ways words never could. And as he carried this understanding quietly, he felt a new rhythm guiding him, one shaped by patience and restraint, rather than by expectation or reaction. He still walked among them, still moved through the same spaces where misunderstandings had once pressed so close, and yet the pressure no longer touched him in the same way. Their judgments, their assumptions, their fleeting criticisms, they were like wind passing over a calm lake. The surface rippled briefly, but beneath he remained steady, anchored by something no one else could reach. He felt the quiet dignity of this steadiness, the soft strength of a life lived in alignment with oneself, and he understood more clearly than ever that no recognition from others could add to it, nor could any misunderstanding take from it. He began to see that his own presence had become enough, that the small, gentle acts he offered were not diminished by being unseen. There was a delicate power in the decision to continue quietly, in the choice to hold to kindness and restraint when no one watched. It was a power that demanded no applause, no acknowledgement, and yet it shaped him, subtly, patiently, like water wearing away stone over time. Each day of calm endurance, each moment of silence held with care, each act of restraint had built something deep inside, a quiet fortress of inner strength that could not be shaken by the shifting moods of the world. Sometimes he would pause and reflect on how far he had come. Could it be that the small act of kindness, the decision not to react, had opened the door he had never noticed before? A door to a life shaped not by the noise or misunderstanding of others, but by the steady pulse of his own heart. He wondered softly, almost in awe. He wondered softly, almost in awe, at the gentle unfolding of his own self-respect, the tender growth of patience and inner power that had emerged from the quiet choice to remain still, to hold silence, like a precious gift. There were moments, of course, when old habits whispered, when the urge to justify, to explain, to demand recognition pressed at the edges of his calm. And in those moments, he practiced the gentle art of letting go, of noticing the urge without following it, of allowing the silence to hold him instead. It was not always effortless, yet with each practice, the quiet became more natural, more like breathing. He began to understand that this restraint, this quiet discipline, was not an absence of life, but a truer engagement with it. It was life observed and lived deeply, without the distractions of proving or defending oneself. Evenings became his quiet sanctuary. He would sit alone, feeling the soft fade of light, the gentle hush that settled over the world, and he allowed himself to notice the gentle pulse of his own being, the small kindnesses he had offered, the silent choices he had made, The moments of restraint he had cultivated, they were all part of him now, woven into the fabric of his life. And as he breathed in the quiet air, he felt a gentle satisfaction, not loud or triumphant, but steady and deep, like the slow rhythm of a river flowing unseen beneath the surface of the earth. He realized that this was the quiet transformation he had been seeking without knowing it. The world may never have acknowledged him, may never have understood the depth of his care or the patience of his heart, and yet he had grown. His life had shifted, not because of recognition or reward, but because of his own quiet choices. He had discovered that self-respect, inner power, and calm dignity could flourish quietly, nurtured by patience, silence, and the tender attention to one's own heart. And as night fell, he felt the gentle fullness of this truth settle over him. There was no need for words, no need for acknowledgement, no need for applause. The life he had quietly built within himself was enough. It was complete in its quiet integrity, and he allowed himself, at last, to rest in the soft, at last, to rest. Steady strength that had grown there, a presence entirely his own, serene and unshakable, like the calm that follows the fading light of day.